panelists, believe it or not, all are on Zoom, so we're using technology to do good in the world. I'm Ken Seaton. I'm the founder of Evan Charles Foundation. I have an amazing team around it. Cliff Scott, Sam, Connie, got some other folks. Got some folks that flew in from out of town for this. Couple of housekeeping items before we kind of get started. Number one, every single one of you is going to get a chance to introduce yourself tonight. Please keep it short. If you are in the wealth management profession, keep that short. Wealth management, that's it. If you do anything for charity, we want to hear. If you're on the board of Habitat for Humanity or work for the Girls Club, that's what we want to talk about. This is a room for people who actually care about the world, right? Some of you have been here, some of you haven't, but everybody here shares that one common theme. So that's what we're about today. This is a non-solicitation group. Okay, what does that mean? Anybody know? Raise your hand. You know.
No pitch.
No pitch. No pitch. No what?
Selling for money.
No selling. Good. Just build relationships. Find ways to help each other. Anybody who solicits, let us know. Don't ask for money. This is not that room today. This is a collaborative environment. This is a conversation today. This is a pretty hot button topic. Obviously, all of you know that. We did this special. We do 4 events a year. This is actually a special event. This is not our next event. Our next events, you want to mark your calendars on July 15th. Same time, same bat place here at 6 p.m. You see the pictures around this little clubhouse room. This is a historic building. It cannot be taken down. The city of Beverly Hills would not allow it. This is a 1929 structure. It's a cool place. It's a cool place to do these kind of meetings. Don't worry about getting each other's phone number right now. We're going to send a list out with everybody's name and email. So if you want to connect with people, we are all about that. Feel free to reach out and say, hey, Ryan, let's grab a coffee. I highly recommend you do that because what you'll find out is some amazing people in the room. You're not going to know it until you grab coffee with them. You're just not. You can't know in a room like this because we're going to go pretty quick. And so we really want to encourage you guys to kind of get together with each other and connect. Zoom callers, I'm going to prepare you for this right now. When we come to you guys, this has happened a lot, and you're not paying attention or you're on mute, we're going to go quick. So if we don't hear from you right away, apologies, but we will continue to move because we do want to get to the conversation. We got a lot of people to sort of go introduce themselves with. So just Zoom callers, just being mindful of that. We're going to go fast. We apologize. It's just one of those things today. So we'll start getting going right now. Questions before I go? And your name? What you do? Yeah.
You need them, co-founder of Jupiter Homes. General contractor, prefab, that's right.
Nice to have you. Sure.
Kurt Scott, Edward Charles Foundation.
Ryan Kaiska, I'm a consulting company.
Sure.
Yes, sir. So I work with the USC Black Alumni Association as well as the Trojan Football Alumni Club. So just dipping my toe in the water now, so you're not gonna make it.
My name is Mike. I'm with AIM-KIT. We're a B Corp helping LA County do cash disbursement to folks who are impacted by the fires.
My name is Drew Bryant. I'm a wealth advisor at India Capital.
What charity you call?
Nothing yet.
Just here to learn. Yeah, awesome.
My name is Lauren Reese and I'm in hospitality operations up at Ricky.
Awesome. Well, Chris, we'll go to you.
Chris Rabels, Christopher Architecture and Interiors, have an architecture business. We have a charity called Christopher Kids that designs spaces for children, special needs children. That kid in a wheelchair wants a treehouse, we design it, give it to him, build it, give it to him.
Trent Walters, IFC Advisors, and we're involved in the Beverly Hills Fire Department Foundation.
My name is Dr. Mimi Narte. I'm in youth sports philanthropy with an environmental science background. I'm the president of Playing for Keeps, which is a nonprofit extension of a corporate company that provides turf fields so kids can have access to safe and fun places to play sport.
Kofi Narte, his husband, and CEO of Global Real Estate Development, into luxury residential real estate. And we're also co-founders of Martin Sports Foundation as well, providing access to sports funds.
Good evening, my name is John Bunzel. I am a wealth manager at Morgan Stanley. I'm here tonight as the board chair of Tree People, one of the leading environmental organizations here in town, which is going to be very involved in wildfire resilience.
My name is Greg Brake, and I'm Executive Director of Foster Warriors, where Navy SEALs mentor foster youth that aged out of the system. And actually, we used to do our 24-hour challenges in the Palisades, the ones there. They're all burned, but we're gonna do the next one on Pepperdine's campus. And really change kids' lives in 24 hours, you know, so if anybody wants to be a mentor, you can check us out, you know, it's a lot of fun.
My name's Shayla Tate. I started a foundation called Good for You Philanthropy Consulting, and I take passion projects for private individuals and private foundations and make sure steward them through.
My name's Cameron. I work with Edward Charles Foundation. Been talking to a lot of you through email, so great to be here. Thank you all for showing up.
Sorry, we missed this row.
Adriana Shannon with CTF Asset Management. We're a private mortgage investment firm. And we're also starting a nonprofit organization that supports foster children aging out of the system. And part of the asset management company is we're trying to support distressed borrowers.
I work with Regarding Her. We're a nonprofit that helps women small business owners. Yeah, I also work for Regarding Her, and we also just completed a grant for small restaurants who have been affected by the fire.
Shiloh Strong, I'm the founder of Ashes to Films, which is a nonprofit for raising money to support filmmakers who've been affected by the fires. Enough money to do 4 films and host a festival.
Judah, I'm the director of Ashes to Films.
I'm Joshua Scott. I'm a student at Amherst College, going in my junior year, and I'm just here to learn as much as I can. So.
Thank you, Kirk and Ken. Rika Rodman. I am with the Wasserman Foundation, working for Casey Wasserman.
Hi, everyone. Marcus Ruiz, also with the Wasserman Foundation.
My name is Ben Rice. I'm a co-founder of Community Collective. We're a professional association for innovative companies seeking to develop resources and relationships to help scale their businesses and advocate for sustainable change in their local communities. I'm also on the LA chapter of the American Lung Association.
I am Rebecca Groen, and I lead all of Paris Hilton's philanthropic efforts. Hello, I'm Kate Alexander. I'm an artist and the founder of End Violence Everywhere. We are the national charity that supports survivors of intimate partner violence, sexual assault, and families facing femicide. We have modular house projects that we're building survivor treatment centers with different therapeutic modalities that are trauma informed. We provide all of this at no cost. And we advocate really hard in both countries for better legislation to make the justice system function for survivors. Thanks, great job.
Aaron Kamen, I'm the songwriter, music producer. In my spare time, I am involved in local government. I'm a member of Beverly Hills, Beverly Crest Neighborhood Association, and we spend a lot of time in Tree People. Thank you. And yeah, happy to be here.
I'm Alexia Trahan. I'm a nanny and a fresh college graduate, and I am here to learn and happy to be here too.
I am Ken Moshon, and I help, I own a company that helps nonprofits raise money called Elevate.
Hey everybody, my name is Jonathan Reisman, the founder of a platform called Rebuild LA, which is a free resource for everybody who lost their houses.
Awesome.
My name is Russ Garber. I'm an expert in the mathematics of gambling and gaming, and my contribution to philanthropy is through my wife, who is a pediatric nurse practitioner and goes on missions throughout the world with the Rotoplast organization. And they do surgeries in areas, mostly cleft lip, in areas that they would otherwise never have any medical care.
Smartest guy here, if you need any bets. he'll tell you. Snap. Go ahead.
Chad Acton. I'm part of Kent's, one of his other communities called Athletes Touch. My philanthropic efforts are with the National Brain Tumor Society. My sister is a brain tumor survivor, and I'm gonna be helping launch their Southern California efforts, here later this year.
My name's Kimberly Usagde, and I'm the executive director of an organization called Team Impact that pairs kids with disabilities and chronic illness with college athletic teams. And I also work as a social impact advisor to entertainment industry.
I'm Connie Stevens. I work at the Edward Charles Foundation. We are a fiscal sponsor nonprofit of over 250 for-profits.
Hi, I'm Marianne Zara. I'm from Pacific Palisades, and I'm the founder of something called Palisades Recovery Coalition.
All right, we're gonna go up to the Zoom audience here. Again, we'll call on you, Anya Long.
Hi, I'm Anya. I work with Sports Philanthropy Network, and I am just here to learn.
Welcome. Catherine Peoples.
Catherine Peoples, HPP Cares, Executive Director. We are in the process of building or rebuilding for those that are uninsured.
Welcome. Abby De Mesa. Abby, there.
Hi, I'm Abby. I'm here with Sports Philanthropy Network as well, and I'm here to learn, and I'm excited to be here.
Elaine Wilson.
Hi, good evening. My name is Elena Wilson. I'm a staff accountant with Edward Charles Foundation. That is a fiscal sponsor of more than 200 entities, and I work along with Kent and Tanya as well. Thank you, Kent.
Thank you. Adrian Saunders. Adrian. All right, skip Adrian. Brian Glass. Are you there? All right, skip. Laura Ponchik. Skipping. Shelley Wax.
Hi, Kent. Hi, everybody. Nice to be here. Shelley Wax, XW Consulting Services. Mostly grant writing and collaborating networking, and have a lot of experience working on the Woolsey fire previously. And so any information I get from this, I'm going to pass on to other people.
Welcome. Dara Danton.
Hi, Dara Danton, Team Palisades. We're the block captains of Pacific Palisades. We're a neighborhood-led, community-powered collective. We're a great group, and I'm just really excited to be part of this. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah. Ford Ainsley.
Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Ford Ainsley and I lead some of our growth and partnerships work at BurnBot. We're a wildfire mitigation startup using advanced machines and robotics to reduce vegetation and fuels, and I've had the opportunity to be working with some communities in the Southern California area recently.
Welcome. Joyce Robinson. Joyce, you there? I will skip Joyce. Jordan Sosa.
Hello, everyone. This is Jordan Sosa. I serve as a community engagement manager for Hopskip Drive. We provide transportation for particularly vulnerable student populations, and we serve multiple school districts in the Palisades, Alameda area. And just here to learn how I could be of assistance, of support, particularly when it comes to school transportation for any student who has been displaced.
Thank you, Jordan. Larry Steinberg.
Good afternoon, everybody. Larry Steinberg. I am the Chief Investment Officer at Financial Architects, Cabin Advisors, partner and tax artists, accounting firm, partner at Powerhouse Agency representing NFL players and NIL. And I'm on the board of the Watkins Award, which is the National Alliance of African American Athletes. And the main reason I'm here is because I lived through the fires with a lot of my neighbors' homes burned down. And so this is a particular interest to me.
Thanks, Larry. Ellie.
Hi.
Ellie, there.
Hi.
My name is Ellie. I'm a student majoring in architectural studies in Boston. I'm just here to just learn more about like the organization and everything.
Thanks, Ellie. Akira Nakano.
Hey, I'm Ikeda Nakano, representing the Fox Family Foundation. Where our mission is to break the link between poverty and vision loss. I also run a music education nonprofit, which mentors kids of all abilities in music. And also, I lived through the Eaton fire and was affected by that. So thanks for throwing this.
Leah Kennett. Leah, you there? All right, let's go to Virginia.
Hi, this is Virginia, and I am also part of the ECF team with Kent and Kirk.
Sharon Rio.
Hi, I'm the zonal underwriting manager for Vault Insurance. So just here to see what you guys are doing.
Thanks, Sharon. Yvonne Frere. Yvonne Frere.
Hi, my name's Yvonne Frere. I'm with MySafe LA, and we're here just to learn.
Thank you. Roy Kessel.
Hi, I am Roy Kessel. I'm the founder of the Sports Philanthropy Network. I've known Kent for a long time and had Kirk last year at our conference. Excited to learn more about this. I know it's a big issue, and we've got a lot of athletes that are concerned about the fires and everything going on out there.
Thanks for joining. Kelly.
Hi, I'm Kelly with MySafe LA. I'm just here to learn about community and education.
Welcome. Ashlyn McGandhi. Ashlyn. All right, we'll skip it. Scott Henderson.
Yeah, Scott Henderson, co-founder of Toki Sports and the Toki Catalyst Foundation. We're all about bringing youth into sports and what it means. So, thank you.
Welcome, Scott. Tony Hawking.
Good evening, Tony Hawking here, also Team Palisades, and with Dara Mariam, lived through the Palisades fire. So thanks for all your support, guys.
Awesome. Did I miss anybody? I think we're good here. Anybody on the Zoom want to introduce themselves before we get going?
Hi, I'm Amelia. Nice to see everybody.
Hi, my name is Mbume. I work for HPP Cares with Catherine Peoples. We're currently working with the Pasadena and Altadena families that are uninsured to help them rebuild.
Welcome. Glad you're here. Anybody else?
Hello, my name is Dante Cornejo. I'm with MySafe LA, and we help with community education, community resilience, and we're just here to learn.
Excellent. Thank you.
Adrian Saunders, also with MySafe LA, here to learn. Thanks for having me.
Hi.
Go
ahead.
I'm Joyce Heiser Robinson. I'm with the Harold Robinson Foundation. We do social and emotional education for kids in marginalized communities through our Camp Ubuntu programs, and we're just here to learn.
Thanks, Joyce.
Hi, this is Alba Ruli. I'm a private banker with East West Bank Private Banking. We have lots of clients that were affected by the fires, especially artists from the Eaton fire. So I'm here on behalf of the bank to learn how we can help more and how also we can help our clients.
Welcome, Alba. Anyone else before we jump in? All right, here we go. The first question I want to ask the panelists is I want to start with you, Bill, just a little bit of your background, and then as part of it, maybe just generally start describing what you think is the biggest challenge we're facing with these fires. And by the way, it could be more than one, but let's keep the one for right now, and we'll kind of go from there. Bill Clerico.
Well, Kent, first I've got to say, I was intimidated by you having to make all of those intros, and I thought we would never get through it, but that was some of the most efficient Zoom management I've seen. So if we can do that, we can certainly solve wildfire. It's really great to be here. My name is Bill Clerico. My day job is I'm a venture capitalist at Convective Capital. We are a venture capital firm based in San Francisco. We focus on climate resilience, and we have a particular focus in and around wildfire. So we have about 20 portfolio companies, all in this fire technology space, including BurnBot, who's here today, and happy to talk about some of the other ones in a bit. And you know, I would say the other my part-time job is we also run a nonprofit called the Red Sky Summit, where we bring together 500 innovators around wildfire every year in San Francisco, and it's entrepreneurs, it's philanthropy, it's investors, it's fire chiefs, utilities, insurance companies, and we really try to help build the community of folks that are trying to do something different. And you know, that's all really grounded in this belief that, you know, in order to address catastrophic wildfire, like we don't need to be 10% better or 20% better or 50% better. We need to be 10 times better or 100 times better. And the only way we're going to do that is by embracing disruptive technology. So that's our mission as an investment firm. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of the question? I was so focused on complimenting your Zoom skills.
In your view, the biggest challenge, and I know there's a lot of them, but we'll try to keep it to one and kind of move from there.
Yeah, I will say I think the big challenge we're focused on is just making sure that prevention and risk mitigation gets the same amount of attention as suppression. You know, we're very, I think, wired as a species to focus on putting out the fires once they start, but many times it's far too late when that happens. And so I think one of the big challenges is getting folks to focus on what we can do in advance of a fire to make sure they never happen, or when they do happen, they're not as catastrophic.
Come back to that. Irene, are you there? I'd love to have you introduce yourself a little bit and tell them what you believe is one of the biggest challenges about fires right now.
Did you say Irene or Aaron?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Aaron. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Aaron.
That's fine. Thanks for having me. I'm the president and CEO of Habitat for Humanity of Greater Los Angeles. We have been building in Los Angeles for 35 years. We primarily build new affordable homes to sell to first-time home buyers and help families who need critical home repairs. So in situations like this, Habitat steps in to help those impacted by the fires to rebuild. And we launched our Rebuild LA campaign within 2 days of the fires starting to help survivors in both the Palisades and the Eaton fire areas. And we have had over 4,000 households contact us for support. So I would say one of the biggest challenges is the sheer volume of households that were affected. And I would say another is just the cost and complexity to build in Los Angeles.
Jerry, your turn.
Hi, thanks for having me. I just wanted to make a shout out to all of those that are on the call that are survivors who lost their homes and or had homes damaged. I think it's difficult to relive this on a day-to-day basis, and sharing your stories and being part of the recovery is pretty strong. So thanks for joining us. I'm Jerry Curry. I am the executive director of Marshall Rock, which is the long-term recovery group from the Marshall Fire. So I've been living and breathing and doing wildfire recovery for the last 3+ years from the Marshall Fire, which happened in Boulder County, Colorado, December 30th, 2021. So I would say that I'd say one of the biggest challenges is that this fire is not one fire, it's many fires and many communities. And I think that's something that's really challenging overall, is that it's being looked at as a single entity versus, and that's from kind of the outside world looking in and those trying to help, that each of these wildfires in each of these communities is a separate disaster unto itself, and each will have its own recovery and its own timeline and its own community level challenges. And so I think it's difficult for larger organizations that are not working on the community ground game, have a difficult time understanding kind of the exact recovery challenges for each community. And so I think the more that things can be done at the local level with local leadership and local buy-in and local engagement will really help. And I think that's also complicated by and layered by the federal noise and the state level noise going on from a politics standpoint and kind of overall funding standpoint.
Thank you. All right, Seth.
Ken, just a quick thanks for the opportunity to you and the Edward Charles Foundation. So my background is probably 30 years at this point, serving in philanthropy on various grant-making foundation boards. I serve on the state board for the California Fire Safe Council, which is a network of 250 to 300 fire safe councils statewide. My day job is the CEO of the Santa Clara County Fire Safe Council. And I think the biggest challenge is we live in a fire-enabled regime here in California, and this won't be the only fire that the LA area has seen. We all know that we've got a history of fires, and the challenge is how do we build back better now to embrace and better prepare for the next time fire comes through the area. And that's not an easy task, but I think it's amongst the biggest challenges collectively that we face.
Like it. I like it. Well, I want to jump back to Bill for a second. We're going to kind of zigzag around, but believe it or not, it's going to kind of intertwine into some interesting themes here. But Bill, can you tell us a little bit about things that you think are potential innovations from a technology standpoint that might help on forecasting fires, preventing them, things of that nature? A lot of us are not familiar with all the technological innovation that's going around this. So I'd like to start with a little bit of a conversation about that, Bill. If you could maybe say some of the things you're aware of and what you think might have some promise and why as well.
Yeah, I think there's a really tremendous opportunity to better leverage technology in wildland firefighting. And, there's this joke that I've heard from many a firefighter about that the fire service is 300 years of tradition unimpeded by progress. And, while I think that's not entirely true, there's definitely a culture of sort of tradition and the way it's been done and all that. And I think this sort of mindset shift to embrace innovation and technology is a really important one. And by the way, I think it's actually really happening. I think, giving the fire service a lot of credit, they've really been leaning into this, over the last couple of years and embracing change. And there's all sorts of technology that I think can be applied here. My backdrop here is one of our portfolio companies called Pano that puts cameras on mountaintops and uses AI to detect fire starts. So you can detect that fire while it's small, which dramatically improves your ability to tailor a response and to do it quickly. And, that can really prevent catastrophic spreads. So certainly AI and remote sensing of many types is, I think we're just really scratching the surface of what that could do in our ability to understand and prevent fire. Just like good old-fashioned software is actually a really powerful tool as well. So we're investors in a company called Fireside, for example, and they provide software for fire departments to enable digital inspections of homes. So, previously, if you had an inspection from, a local fire department, got written on a clipboard and maybe put in a drawer and you got a copy and that was it. And now with Fireside, that same firefighter doing that same inspection can take pictures. It goes into a digital experience. The resident gets a digital report of their house and what vulnerabilities exist. And there's, follow-ups and there's opportunities for the resident to upload proof of compliance and stuff like that. So there's just ways like this by introducing, stuff that doesn't have to be super fancy. Like we don't have to land rockets on the moon to really better leverage technology in this, but by doing that type of work, we make it more efficient, more effective. It's really a force multiplier on, our existing efforts. And so, those are just kind of two examples, although there's many.
Excellent, thank you. Aaron, I want to jump to you now. You mentioned about the sheer number of homes being one of the biggest challenges, and maybe you can walk us through this in a little bit more sort of detailed way. Obviously, we know numbers big, but what is getting behind that challenge, and maybe you kind of can explain, the construction process, permitting, things like that as well, so we have a further appreciation of why it's so hard.
Sure. I think, California has very complex building codes, more so than the rest of the nation. And our permitting process in regular times can be 12 to 18 months to get a permit issued. So obviously nobody wants to wait that long during the construction process. Some of the things that we are doing are to, and I think, not just Habitat, but we're looking at getting fire, fire resistant home designs approved through the city and through the county so that we can begin moving more quickly to rebuild homes. We're also doing bulk purchasing of materials with other builders. We are collaborating through the Builders Alliance with builders to have a streamlined process for families to select the home model that they want. I think another thing that we could do is, as nonprofit organizations focused on the affordable housing and the uninsured, is we could develop a more streamlined, and this probably goes to technology, could develop a more streamlined case management process so that people don't have to be interviewed 5, 6, 7 times to determine what the best path forward is for them.
Got it. Thank you. Jerry, you brought up a really interesting point about the nuance of these are different fires in different communities, and that's what complexity is. What did you look at, Jerry, of how do you solve for that problem? And what things have you seen that you guys utilize in the Marshall fires that may be able to be utilized in this sense? I'd love to sort of hear maybe some thoughts around that, if you're willing to share it.
Sure. And I think that, when I'm encouraged by seeing so many on this call at the local level, whether it's the, Palisades group or the Altadena and group. And I think that's a start, right? One of the things that really helped us is embracing these neighborhood liaison model, where there's someone in the neighborhood, a trusted someone in the neighborhood, and also the really embracing the faith-based communities and the churches and all of those, so that you really could keep a pulse on what the actual needs are, not what everyone hoped to deliver. And I think, Erin probably feels this in her role with Habitat too, is this sense of there's a lot of people and donors assuming what people's needs might be, or making assumptions of the socioeconomic, just because Palisades happens to have really, $1 million homes. There's also many within that community that are struggling, just as the flip side in Pasadena or Altadena. And so I think really recognizing and really keeping your ear to the ground as an organization, as a recovery unit, and giving a lot of opportunities for town halls or for feedback loops from residents on truly what are they needing, right? Like, we didn't know that people were having such a struggle with food insecurity, for instance, and the middle income. And Boulder County is also a very high net worth county. And the assumption was made, well, no one's struggling, they have plenty of food. Well, they weren't, because every dollar at that point goes back into rebuilding your home. And so I think that there's those pieces. I also think that, going back to the technology and what innovation can do, utilizing technology to share and kind of best practices, creating Slack groups, making sure that people do feel connected online, but then also recognizing not everyone's going to be online, and making sure you have other methods to reach people in language, or if there's accessibility issues. And then I'm just going to add one thing onto the technology piece, and that is, and because I heard so many sports people and athletics and athletes, that gamification of education is also, I think, a great innovation, in that, there's so many ways to reach kind of young, everybody has a phone in their pocket trying to educate. We're a long ways from stop, drop, and roll, we all learned in 2nd grade. Now, how do you educate people to, what does it mean to report a wildfire? Who do you report it to? Making sure people understand that a spark is a spark. So all of those things, I think, are innovative and potential ways to embrace technology.
Thank you, Jerry. Seth, you said something interesting. You said the challenge is, how do we build back better? And I have some ideas about what you might mean by that, but I'd love for you to sort of take us through sort of a foray of what Seth means by build back better, some of the bigger picture components, and anything that you think you might need to fill in for us to have a better understanding of what that says. It implies that it wasn't built right the first time. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Seth.
Yeah, thank you. And this is such an interesting topic, and it's up to somewhat of an individual interpretation when you say the word build back better. But the challenge is we know that many of the homes that didn't survive, certainly not all of them, but many of the homes that didn't survive the fires were built pre-1991, before the fire up in the Bay Area where I live, the Tunnel Fire, many know it as the Oakland Hills Fire, was really a driver for statewide building code reform and requiring things like Chapter 7A and other things to strengthen the structure. But when we look at building back better, there's many layers, and I'll just bring up a few. One of them is, as a philanthropist and someone that's involved in this, how do we build back from an equity lens perspective? And by equity lens, I mean, how do we ensure that those that might not have the financial wherewithal or the capacity to afford, $100,000 worth of home hardening, for example, to really fortify their home, how could they participate equitably in getting access to those programs? Also, when I think about building back better, how do we design our communities so that ingress and egress can be approved when you have to evacuate in an emergency? And by the way, this holds not just for wildfire, but for earthquakes, floods, and other disasters, right? Everybody here probably remembers Montecito back, I think, in 2017, 2018. And that was what we call a debris flow, right? That was really triggered by the intense wildfires that caused the mudslide. So building back better means, wait, how do we improve and how do we design both structurally and from a community layout standpoint so that we're better prepared to manage and deal with fire? And also, how do we create resiliency? Because one of the things that I think we see in many wildfires, and it's part of the human behavior pattern, is ultimately, people start to take action. They start to do things like defensible space. And Bill had mentioned, right, he's got a number of portfolio companies that just by coincidence, we resell several of their products like Fireside that are defensible space tools. But the challenge, and I'll end with this point, is build back better. How do we keep that resiliency going forward? Because look, 5, 10, 12 years from now, the fire will begin to recede in the everyday life of a person. But you still have to maintain a level of vigilance, right? Because you never know when that next disaster is going to hit. And I think build back better means educating the community, making sure that there are things like FireWise communities and other types of engagement vehicles that will allow people to collectively work together so that we can not stay on what I would say DEFCON 4 forever, because nobody can do that. But how do we make resiliency part of our everyday life? Because, in the end, the fire agencies, as great as the job they do, they're not going to be able to save everyone. And we all have to have some skin in the game and figure out how we can do that collectively as a community.
Great answer. Thank you. Bill, I'm going to switch back to you a little bit. I want to understand and hopefully have the audience too, when you're looking at, investing in technology, how are you looking at the potential of change? And I know that's a sort of a pretty abstract question, but there's going to be a deployment of capital in this innovative technologies, and I think 44 million was invested, in one of the rounds, with Pano as an example, which is, a fair amount of money. So what are investors looking at? And I assume you guys are looking at solving problems, but if you could speak to that a little bit more and get a little bit more granular, in terms of how we as non-investors can understand what you guys are looking at in terms of dollars and cents, but also impact.
Yeah, I think what makes this space so interesting and kind of different than maybe generalist technology investing is that sometimes the business models are just not that clear. And so, I can't tell you how many pitches we get where it's actually a really great idea. Something needs to exist that doesn't exist, and someone has great experience and a background that could go build it, wants to go do that, and is pitching us for capital. But if they don't have a way to commercialize it, if they can't find a customer, then we can't invest. We're sort of profit-driven investors and investing in commercially viable companies. And so, a big part of what makes this space hard is there's just not that many folks that actually buy this stuff. You have to either have figured out a path into the federal government or into state and local governments, and really be solving a problem for them that they're willing to pay for. Utilities are sometimes buyers in this market that they'll buy equipment to detect fires or to harden infrastructure or do sort of fuel management. Home and property owners, insurance companies. So sometimes the hard part in this market is just who's going to be the ultimate buyer for these companies and actually buy their product, and can you get those proof points to show that you're solving a big enough pain point that they're actually willing to pay you for it. And that's sometimes the big hurdle in this space. We have a bunch of folks that have great ideas and are really passionate and want to solve this problem, but venture capital may not be the tool to go fund those types of things. And that's where I think philanthropy or other sort of types of capital can be great partners to us in that.
Well, thank you. That's a great answer. Aaron, I want to jump back to you a little bit. I think obviously, Habitat has an incredible history in construction of homes. I guess one question is how do you see it in a way? Meaning, how would you do it if you could rebuild these homes? What things would you try to do or implement to enable the safe rebuilding of homes that have resiliency? That term is being used now, at least on this Zoom call. And any other examples where Habitat's done stuff like this in other communities, and maybe that playbook a little bit. I don't need to go in detail, but I just a little bit more on that topic because you guys are such experts on that side of things.
Well, thank you for the question. I think if I could just piggyback on Bill's last response, ironically, for the folks that we're working with, technology played a role just in the very basic sense. I think, we're a financial sponsor for an organization called the Eaton Fire Survivors Network, which was a WhatsApp group that formed over pickleball. And when the fires started, they hadn't had any warnings yet. The group was in communication with each other and got each other to evacuate over WhatsApp. And then they formed a Discord group, and now they have thousands of people on their Discord group, and they're providing information to the community. And it's become a great neighbor to neighbor resource. And they've developed Black captains, and and they have Thursday evening training sessions or information sessions. So, I mean, technology in a very basic sense can even be used to, I think, prevent catastrophic loss during a time like this. So I just wanted to throw that in. I'm actually in Lahaina right now. I'm studying and working with my counterpart in Lahaina to see how they've addressed the rebuilding process. I will say that since their wildfire in August of 23, only 10 homes have been rebuilt in Lahaina by anybody, by not just Habitat, by any developer. So 10 homes have been completed, 300 permits have been pulled, which means 290 are churning their way through. And the building process is taking longer because materials are not available. I mean, what took him 3 weeks to get trusses before is taking 18 weeks and 90 days to get concrete poured on a pad. So I think they were hoping to be much farther ahead in the game at this stage than they are, but so was pretty much every other developer here. So lessons learned would be, move faster on learning what survivors need. Do they need smoke remediation, repairs, rebuilding? We have a lot of households right now that just need, and I'll say just need smoke remediation, but are being told that that's going to take a year, which in my mind is ridiculous. I mean, that we should be prioritizing getting those families back in while the permits are going through the process. Now, talking about permitting, I think simplifying the approval process. It's everybody's intent, but it's not necessarily, it's not necessarily streamlined quite to the extent that we need it to be yet. And I would say, Jerry alluded to this, but we can't forget supporting kind of the low and the moderate income families in the communities whose main source of wealth was their home, and they lost all that value overnight. And so and maybe their insurance company dropped them a couple months beforehand, or they had lived there for generations and paid it off and dropped their insurance. So we need to make sure that the plan for them is not just to have people buy up their land from them and have them go somewhere else, but trying to really maintain the community so that we can ensure that the folks that were making the cultural, heritage of these communities so rich to start with are able to stay there. That's innovative financing tools and, finding ways to cover those gaps outside of maybe what insurance is going to pay.
Excellent, thank you. Aaron, do you have any comments to anything Aaron just said? Just curious.
I do. Agree with everything that Aaron had said. And I think one of the things we saw a huge lag in permitting, and one method that I utilized was really proving the financial kind of to the county, muckety mucks, et cetera, is to really force the issue that if someone's not rebuilt, property taxes are much lower. And so it's affecting the town collect. So using that financial kind of lens and looking at that economic impact to the county itself, who then can't help the citizens as well. And so I think that recognizing that not getting something rebuilt, it really has a carry on and layered effect that just keeps on injuring the community. And so if there's a block and if someone's in gatekeeping and it's not moving, I think leveraging every resource that a community has and or networks that people have to push that envelope to make sure that it's getting. And then I think the other piece is, to the Lahaina, I've been watching and tracking that as well and called in on that. And it is what is shocking is that, that there's nowhere for a lot of those people to go, particularly on an island, right? So I think that's kind of compounding. But I think this is when you ask the question on venture capitalists and investing and where does public-private partnership come in, finding ways for private entities or private investments in material sourcing and or bulk buying or whatever you want to look at it from a supply side, that can help a community get things built back, right? And to Seth's point, built back better, looking at, mitigation and looking at kind of materials that could be purchased in bulk. And so I know we worked hard with different suppliers to offer really generous discounts for those from a contractor side or from a seller side, consumer side. So I think there's a lot of different ways for all the different entities to get involved if they're working together. And I think that's probably one of the other challenges is, they're not always working together, kind of they're maybe working parallel and not be aware of what the other organizations are doing. I know we have someone from insurance and, building back better requires that insurance companies incentivize building back better and or are transparent about what that even means, right? If they're going to be, someone's going to be required by code or permit or regulatory state, which Aaron, ours is pretty thick in Colorado also. And so, I think making sure that people understand what that even looks like and what that policy looks like on their new home and what they can tap into on their old home policy. So a few thoughts.
Great. Seth, any comments to Jerry's thoughts and as well as Aaron's?
Yeah, it's a real fascinating dialogue because one of the things that I think collectively as a state, we need to get better because, over the next 20 or 30 years, if you look at all the climatologist research, at the end of the day, we're going to go through an increasing number of fires as we look and we build and our zoning and our building codes continue to move into what we call the wildland and urban interface, right? And if you look at California over the last 10 to 15 years, the fastest population growth in the state is in the wildland urban interface areas, right? And so that's going to create more statewide challenges. And so I think to echo what Jerry and Aaron said, I think it's really imperative that we take a kind of micro lens of what we're going to learn from these conflagrations and figure out how we cut red tape, how we move faster going forward, because we're only going to have increasing wildfire risk And unfortunately, there'll be other communities that suffer the similar kinds of fates that we have here. And so how do we adjust in these times? It's a complicated issue. It's not going to be solved overnight. Both UCLA and USC have a number of programs that are looking at doing these kind of things. But I'll also just quickly take the other side of the lens. I am a big technology proponent, and I think there is an opportunity to really leverage technology to help with faster recovery. For example, there's a lot of new technology around machine learning and AI that can do automated damage assessments. So if you're an insurance adjuster, you don't have to spend 10 or 15 days trying to get into a burnt structure, right? You can use a satellite or a drone and have technology that can look at that structure and make a very quick assessment to determine whether it is a total loss or a partial loss, so that the claims process can happen quicker and you can get cash into the hands of that family or that homeowner or that property owner quickly. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, not just on the wildfire mitigation and risk reduction, but on the recovery side to really leverage technology to make it if not easier, a more consumer-friendly and a frictionless process, or less friction, because look, the mental stress. Many people in the room either have lost their homes or know someone. I've got a number of friends, and even though many of them happen to have significant financial assets, just the mental stress I can see is really taking its toll on the family, and that's something that usually gets lost 6-10 months a year after the disaster. And I think there's a role for technology to help mitigate those kind of effects.
Those great comments. Bill, kind of two questions. One, I do want you to comment if you've seen anything on the side of investing in technology that addresses sort of this damage sort of recovery and expediting that process. But then secondly, a little bit around Jerry's comments with innovation and the idea that which you mentioned also, which is it's a private-public partnership. And how are you guys looking at creating those partnerships with these technology innovations? Maybe give us a little bit more insight how that's going to work, because I would imagine that's literally where the rubber is going to meet the pavement on innovation, because you can have the greatest innovation in the world, but if nobody's adopting it, it means nothing, right? So how are you guys looking at overcoming that issue?
Yeah, I'll say on the recovery side, most of our investments in that theme have been around insurance. So we're investors in a company called Stand, which is basically building 3D models of structures and simulating fire moving through and using that to actually price and underwrite risk. The observation is that just most homeowners don't actually get credit for the risk mitigation work that they do from insurers in any sort of meaningful way. And so if you built an insurance company from the ground up with that at its core, what would it look like? We're excited about that, because I think, as communities recover, having really robust insurance coverage is an important, part of the toolkit. And as we all know, in California, things are going the wrong direction there. We're not investors, but there's a company called Bright Harbor, which is sort of a recovery kind of concierge and guidance service that is trying to make resources available to folks. So, I'm not familiar in depth with the company, but there are definitely, folks using technology to try to make recovery easier and better. On the public-private partnership side, I think we're off to a good start, but we got a ways to go. There's different, I think, types of capital that can help in different ways, and I think part of what we look for when we're making an investment is, has the entrepreneur thought through how can they leverage different sources of capital to help in these efforts. So as an example, sometimes companies will use philanthropic money to fund a pilot or a demo. The first camera installation in a town might be, funded by a local philanthropic effort. And, the nice thing about that is it both solves a local problem, but also can catalyze, a company that can then go on to sort of scale that impact. So it's a really sort of, I think, interesting use of philanthropic money to think about that. And then we also work with government agencies to try to build partnerships. We work with CAL FIRE and their Office of Wildfire Technology Research and Development. We do a lot of advocacy work at the federal level, trying to sort of bring technology and on-ramps to partnerships there as we can. So there's still a long ways to go. I think we could do better.
How receptive are you seeing some of these folks when you try to interface with them?
I'm sorry, could you say that again? It was just a little bit low.
How receptive are you seeing these public entities when you try to interface?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a mix. I'll say some agencies are really forward thinking. Like I would say, Chief Brian Fennessy and the Orange County Fire Authority are one of like the absolute leaders in terms of embracing technology and really innovative and really think about how can they leverage these tools. And then I think other agencies are just they don't have the experience or the fluency, and so it's a longer conversation to kind of get them over the hump. And candidly, they've got their hands full. I think we're largely on our back foot when it comes to wildfire, and so a lot of these agencies don't have the full-time staffing or the resources to sort of make time for technology. They're just trying to kind of get through the next season, and so I do think we have to think about how that type of work, more systemically, and how do we help set agencies up for success in using these types of tools, because it's they've got really important jobs where lives are on the line, and do you spend those couple hours in the day filling a empty firefighter seat because you're down a person, or installing a new software package? Like those are tough decisions, and so we want to set our agencies up to be more effective at that.
Thank you. We're going to jump into the insurance one. Everybody's kind of brought it up a little bit at this point in time. Obviously a lot of us, you're homeowners, and you're aware of it as a homeowner, the insurance problem in California. I'll give you guys each sort of a minute to identify what you see as the problem, so to speak, and what you think are potential solutions as it relates to California in general. And I guess let's start with Aaron. Let's start with you on this one.
This is probably my area of least expertise. But I'll just say what I'm hearing from survivors, and that is that there's a grand disparity between different insurance companies and how they interface with their policyholders, and some keep switching policyholders from adjuster to adjuster to adjuster, and there's no continuity of knowledge between one and the next. Some wanted to write a check up front and say, okay, we're done with you, and without really doing a lot of assessment. And so I think some kind of perhaps standardization of a model that and that insurance companies could hold, and how they work through these challenging times with their policyholders. And we're going to need, the FAIR plan is, I think, out of money, but I mean, we're going to need a public resource for those who can't afford insurance or properties that are at higher risk. And I don't think that the current model is solving it. So I think I'll just leave it there. I think responsiveness, because people are going through the most traumatic, potentially experience of their life right now. And the simpler we can make it for policyholders, the better. But I'm going to turn it over to my other panelists for the solutions.
Seth, what about you?
Yeah, thanks for the softball question. Obviously, if it was easy, it would have been solved by now. But I think we're seeing some progress. And I'll say something that I think might surprise people, but I think, there is a tremendous opportunity, and the insurance companies know this, to make money within California as an insurance entity. We've started a bit down that path. We're now moving forward with what's known as catastrophe or catastrophic modeling, which is basically using, for lack of a better term, AI and technology. Instead of looking back 20 years that California has historically done, we're now testing, kind of forward-looking models that take into account climate change and take into account other factors, because, wildfires that happened 15 or 20 years ago are not correlated to the type of fires that we're seeing now that move faster, that burn more structures, that are higher heat in intensity. So I think, utilizing technology is one of the ways, again, I'll go back to what Bill had mentioned. One of his portfolio companies is Fireside. And I mention them only because we are a partner with them. I think we were one of their first customers, and we resell their technology. But that allows the homeowner to track and visually show all the defensible space changes that they've made. So in essence, you've got an audit trail to go back to your insurance company and say, here's what I've done to mitigate my risk. Now, if you take that individual homeowner and kind of take your lens and scale that out to the landscape level, at the community level, right? If you can show and demonstrate significant community level risk reduction, the insurers, I think, will be incentivized to come and write those policies. So, it's not a quick solution. There are capital requirements that have to be adjusted in California, but I do think through technology, through moving forward with a catastrophic model, and through some of the plans that, let's just say that the California Department of Insurance, CDI, has currently done in terms of how they're trying to bring insurers back into the market with writing an 85% type policy. I think there's an opportunity, and I think technology is one of the best ways that we're going to unlock a more stable insurance market over the next 5 years.
Good answer. It was a softball question. Bill, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I'd agree with a lot of what's been said. Although I think a more radical change is going to be required for us to have a healthy insurance market, particularly in California. Like risks to homes are kind of going like this, right? And it's great to be able to use a CAT model to price that in for the first time. Like it's kind of crazy. We ask our insurance companies that everyone knows the risk is going like this, but we tell them you can't price that in. You can only price what happened before, right? And so no surprise, they're all losing money and they're fleeing the state. And so like there is, I think, a real reckoning around policy. And I know there's very real affordability challenges with insurance rate increases, but we need to have a healthy market where that risk is priced appropriately. We don't today, I think, largely due to price caps that have been instituted. And I think there's some positive movement, but I actually don't think we've really addressed that core issue. And even if we do address that core issue, so now we price the policies, appropriately, insurers can do business in the state. The homeowners can't afford those new rates. And so, you have this fundamental challenge of like the risk is just going up and up and up, and someone has to pay for that. And so, my view is that the industry really has to radically change to embrace risk mitigation. And it's, fire safe councils, it's mitigation to homes, it's how do you change the shape of that curve so it's not going up and up and up? That's the actual real problem. And that's going to require real research, technology, and a really rebuilding of our residential environments in and around wildfire. And that's going to be an enormous change. And I think the question is like, are we up for it? And if we're not, we're either going to have no insurance or really expensive insurance. And I think that's the change that needs to happen. So, that's at least my little soapbox.
I have a few thoughts just from a recovery standpoint. Since I was pretty much rooted in, I'd say I've done over 300 insurance reviews for wildfire survivors, so in their households. And the number one predictor of a homeowner recovering who has lost their home to fire is their insurance. It doesn't matter all the other things surrounding that, but it is truly the way to recover. And there's such a lack of understanding from the general homeowner of their insurance policy and what they're insured for and what each of the categories are. I mean, most people haven't even read through it. I'm getting a huge echo. But I would say that that's where the biggest challenge is that people don't understand what they're insured for. They don't understand they should ask for when was the last time they did a checkup. they, as a responsible homeowner, should make sure that they're covered at today's price of what it would cost to rebuild. Insurance companies don't proactively reach out for that. I do think technology could help the inventory challenge. I think that's one of the most painful, mentally and emotionally challenging things of our survivors, going through their inventory and submitting that. And there has to be a way for someone to be able to get through that easier, so that most people don't just give up and take the settlement, which is what Aaron was speaking to, that they offer a check. So I think that there are so many factors to it. I think looking at the CAT models and doing those kind of things for future reference, but the day to day and anyone dealing with survivors directly day to day, the challenge is understanding insurance. How do I navigate it? What do I ask for? What is, what is ordinance and law? What are these categories? How do I ask for more and not be bullied? And I think it's really challenging. And when people say, I think the other thing is the term, and the media has overused this, underinsured doesn't mean that insurance companies are awful and they're horrible people. Underinsured could also be the homeowner's fault as well, in that they didn't keep along with what the market would bear. So I think there's a piece of both of those. And I agree with my panelists, like Bill and Seth, on there has to be a change. Just being able to pull out and, that's one way of an insurance company handling, but certainly not the best thing for a community.
Got it. Thank you, Jerry. I'm gonna do one sort of final question for each panelist. And then we'll open it up to the audience and you guys have any questions for them. But so far, great job. Thank you guys again. Just each one, maybe one thing that you think if it happened would ultimately result in the sort of fire resiliency that we would want to see as residents of, whether it's Altadena, Pasadena, or Palisades, that could be a game changer so we can all feel safe again. Where do you see that happening? I know it's a big question, but just keep it to one thing. And then we're going to wrap, and then we'll do the questions from the audience and go from there. Jerry, we'll start with you since you're on camera.
So in building resilience, I'm understanding the question, what is one thing that could help build resilience across the board? And I think finding a way to communicate with all in an authoritative way so that people trust the information that they're getting is either creating a platform or creating a combined collaborative way of streaming information that everyone can tap into, that they trust the information on there. Because right now, like Aaron said, people seek information in the best place they can try to find it, and it's not always true, or it's outdated, or it's just not helpful. And so if there was a way to create, and I'll throw this to Bill, even from a technology standpoint, some type of platform that's an aggregate other than just Google search, obviously, but that actually can be trusted, and have a way to have all the different streams feeding into it would be really helpful, because I think people just don't know who to turn to get accurate information in the process of recovery.
Excellent answer. Aaron, what about you?
I would say we have to not just rebuild, but to build smarter. And so I think prevention starts with where we build and how we build. So smarter land use decisions, and also just ensuring defensible space, because one of the things that Habitat is, a simple solve is we're not going to have attics in our homes going forward in these areas. We're going to create more defensible space around the homes. And then, although I don't, I know we have a lot of building codes already, I think looking at ways to cost effectively build in more specific, codes that would build more fire resilient homes that are standardized would be helpful.
Thank you. Seth?
Well, it's a great question. I've kind of been ruminating on it since you asked it, and I might say something different tomorrow than I would today, but what comes to mind now is, as a society, we need to embrace more prescribed fire, or what's known in some circles as good fire. because one of the ways to reduce the intensity of wildfires, and one of the great challenges we have, the challenge of our time, and the data is pretty clear on this, is wildfires are becoming more destructive because they're moving faster, they're burning hotter. And so one of the best ways that we can, and it's a tool that we can do today, we have the technology, we have the expertise, and we have the history, is to embrace more prescribed fire throughout the state, to take advantage of how that can alter vegetation and how that can reduce the risk of severe destructive wildfires. Because we're not going to eliminate wildfire from the landscape. In fact, California is a landscape that needs fire. It's a fire-prone landscape. But how do we reduce the risk of major destructive conflagrations? And I think there's ways that we can do that, whether that's through BurnBot or other tools and mechanisms, but embracing more good fire, I think, would be a good start.
Well, Bill, what about you?
Well, since, my fellow panelists have made my favorite points around recovery, home hardening, and prescribed fire, I think I'm going to pick on the utilities and say that, I think the utilities need to continue to take a larger share of the responsibility around this stuff. If you're looking at California fires, historically, 65% of the acreage that's burned is from fires that are started by utilities. And so, we need to continue to invest in hardening our electrical grid. I think, like electricity prices are probably another sort of consumer good that doesn't actually accurately reflect the risk of those networks. And so it probably means, higher electric bills for many of us. But we need to continue to invest in reducing that risk. And, the same high winds that cause really adverse fire conditions are the same high winds that cause electrical failures. And so it's a really, those are really bad moments when you have sparks, in those Santa Ana winds. And so how can we reduce that risk? How can we use technology to understand that risk, to sort of best mitigate that risk? I think there's really big opportunity there.
Excellent. Any questions from the audience? Yeah, go for it.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Mariam Zara. I'm from Pacific Palisades. I'm the chair emeritus of something called the Pacific Palisades Community Council, which has been around 50 years. But more apt, I guess, is the fact that in the last 6 months, we founded something called the Palisades Recovery Coalition. And in the process of founding this, we've gone out and we've spoken to hundreds of Palisadians who have come together over various meetings, over the table, in person, and by Zoom, to talk about what this recovery looks like. So we are slowly emerging with a plan that sort of looks like what you have to do to build back 5,000 homes and deal with the materials that you guys talked about, the storing of materials, the price of materials, but very much also this idea of building back in a more resilient way. So not just putting the houses back, but putting them up more resiliently. I will be slightly wrong, but long, but I will truncate. So in the early days of the fire, the reaction of the mayor and the city attorney and all the official dump was to say, build it back fast. So they said they were going to streamline permits for people who were going to build back exactly what they had, plus or minus 10%. And that was the initial reaction. Bring it back. What is happening now is people saying, wait a minute, do we have time? Do we have the bandwidth to step back and look again and build back in a more resilient, build back better way? And that is a big question. So to all the things that you guys talked about, people who find themselves underinsured don't necessarily have the luxury of sitting back and waiting and looking and being more resilient. Some people's insurance companies require for them to build back within 2 or 3 years if they are paying them. Not everybody has a place to stay, right? So in Lahaina, I think they built housing so people had a place to stay. In the Palisades or Eaton, people are everywhere. So we are working with RAND to bring charrettes to the community so that we can ask people who have that bandwidth to come and look again at their neighborhoods and say, can we reconfigure? Can we think again about how to be resilient? Is it architecture? Is it having smaller fire stations that are stationed in the hillsides? Is it potentially not building every single piece of land, right? So the Blue Ribbon Commission has suggested that we leave some land not built, and that's a natural break in the progression of the fire. Is it that we have to launch a campaign at the state and ask state lawmakers to have a greater commitment to to resilience, to fire protection infrastructure, to brush clearance, all of these things. So all of these things are very much on the table. And I just want to say with technology, there are a couple of American companies that have come to us and they've introduced ideas of like, creating these technologically enabled delivery systems of water, where they have compounds that make that water actually stronger. Last week, our state senator's office actually brought 3 companies from Israel to Pacific Palisades. We met at the fire station to talk about how technology can help with early detection, like that fire that I see behind your head, Bill. That is brilliant back there, that little square. Yeah. Early detection or the deployment of water, spigots that kind of go in the direction of where the fire is coming to try to catch it early. Technology is great, but who pays for it, right? I mean, the state is already underinvested in our fire infrastructure. The city of Los Angeles, of which we are famously a part, has their own fiscal woes. So we're actually talking about, can we set up an authority where we can have the money to pay for these kinds of things? Our council member is setting up a climate resilience district, tax increment financing. Maybe that money can go towards things like this. So the more we dig in, the more questions we have. And in the meantime, there are 5,000 or 6,000 people who need to build their homes back. So I just want to say it's hard. I appreciate all of these conversations. All of these things have to be talked about and solved, but every step we take in that direction, we find more layers, like an onion, someone said the other day, more layers of questions, things we have to solve for, and really help private philanthropy all coming together to find funding and solutions.
Wasn't a question, but yeah, sure. No, it was great though, Bob. It was great. No, it was good. Anybody want to react to Graham's, honestly, very well spoken.
Bill, who comes to the table? Is it public, private? Is it investors? Is it is it philanthropy? Who comes to the table to fund this improved resilience?
Yeah, I think it's very case dependent, but I think it's kind of an all of the above, it's like the utilities that hold the liability. It's the government that hear from their, constituents. It's insurance companies when they, and reinsurers that hold the bag, it's local organizations that, care about this work. It's the homeowner, I think everyone needs to own a bigger share of the costs and, the estimates on what is going to be required to make the world ready for climate change are immense. Like trillions of dollars will have to be invested in housing and infrastructure and all that stuff. And so, it's no one stakeholder in my view. I think it's a tax we will all have to pay, in no matter what business we're in. But it's sort of the new reality.
Yeah. I actually have a question for you. So being in real estate, been asked what's going on, I would say from people, we know families that have been impacted, but it seems to be a tale of many narratives. Some homeowners want to get their insurance money into the state, some want to rebuild quickly, some want to wait and see what they can rebuild. Is there, like boots on the ground, what you are, is there a prevailing sort of sentiment? I look at things like a pie chart where, of course, it's going to be different.
Our pie changes every day.
Does it change?
Early on, we said that one of the most important things we could do was to float a survey to figure out what people think, where they are, right? Are people planning on staying away for a long time? If they have to stay away, let's say for 2 or 3 or 4 or 6 months, let's say they have children, those children go to school somewhere else. Are they going to be willing to come back? Do they want to sell? Do they want to sell because they want to upgrade their property? Maybe they didn't have a view before and now they're thinking they can rebuild on a piece of land with a view. Who are we really looking at? That has changed in the course of 6 months, shockingly. So one of the things we talk about, and Tony, who's on the call, can actually talk about this. One of the things we talk about is to put out there that the Palisades is not a monolith. Right. And I think Aaron touched on that. The assumption is that everyone in the Palisades can just up and build a house. And it is so untrue. At least 30% of the population of Pacific Palisades that lost a home was older, old enough to have to think hard about, do they have 5 or 6 years to rebuild a home? A lot of those older people who didn't have mortgages didn't necessarily have a bank that reminded them every year that they had to have property insurance or homeowners insurance. Some of them did not have it. So their entire nest egg was invested in that home, which is now gone. There are families, young families, that find themselves underinsured. There are shockingly people who were between insurance companies. Maybe the premium was too high and they thought, oh, I'm not going to burn down in the next 2 months. I've got some time. Let me find a new insurance company, and ended up burning down. So the Palisades is riddled with people in different circumstances with different needs. Aaron was actually talking about figure out what people need before you go offering stuff. True, even in the Palisades, where people assume that everything is kind of very much the same. People are definitely up in the air. People get their lots cleared, they come back, they look at their lot and they say, you know what, too traumatic, I'm not gonna come back. A lot of that is happening. There are upwards of 200 lots on the market in Pacific Palisades. That is a lot. So, changing, shifting landscape, and we try to quantify what kind of changes around the corner, and we can't.
Good stuff, right?
Yeah, Ken, I just want to tell you two resources, but then also ask a question about the fire department. Two resources that are very helpful that I personally use are, Anthony Margolis is a real estate agent with, what's the,
Amalfi.
what's that? Malfi, yeah. But I've seen a couple of their podcast or their Zooms, very, very helpful, panels with people that are on the boots on the ground. And Tracy Park's office, extremely helpful. I got a homeowner's insurance company to pay, not I did, but I got Tracy Park's office put lien on them when they denied them. So they're very, very active. The question is, how are we gonna get the fire department funded properly? People know about the water shortage. What people don't know is that there's a piece of technology they bought for when a helicopter goes and takes water out of a pool, it's dangling. But Vita and Clinita invented this thing for the military to where it's like a stick. You go, boom, take the water, and you're gone. Like 1/10 of the time. These fires could have possibly been put out. They bought these devices for all their helicopters, but they didn't have the funding for training for a year. Those devices were sitting brand new in a box for a year. And if they just had the funding for the training, they would, who knows what could happen. So the fire department also needs to be properly prepared or properly, funded. The question is, how do you do that? How do we come together to make that happen?
Well, I think Miriam identified, you're gonna have to establish something else.
Yeah.
That's the key.
And we're really trying, we're even looking up at the state level to see where there can be funding sources for this kind of investment. I mean, in this particular fire, it was a windstorm, so they grounded their helicopters pretty quickly, but they also didn't actually get there, by my count, by my video from my backyard, not exactly scientific, but maybe 17 or so minutes. 17 or 18 minutes later, it was over. The sky above us was red and it was pretty much over. So that early detection, you guys talk about technology and investing in it. This fire has cost Los Angeles quite a bit. So investing in that early technology would have been great. We also talk about, these communities that burned down were built 50 years ago, 60 years ago. We're rebuilding these communities, looking ahead 50, 60, 70 years. How do we build for the future? And so maybe fire departments are different. Bill, was it you that said it's years of tradition not impeded by progress? And maybe turn that around. Yeah, so technology, forward thinking, learning from our mistakes, none of which we do very well.
Anybody have a final question?
I'll make a comment on some of the funding pieces that were just discussed in terms of the fire departments and what kind of funding's available. There are, federal government has cut a lot, but there are a lot of community level post-disaster, pre-disaster prevention, resilience, all of those different terms that people use. There is money available, and you can also push your legislators to tap into the Wildfire Caucus and a lot of the funding. So we had several very, very active senators and congressional staffers, representatives, in Colorado that ended up getting a lot of funding for our fire departments. And so I think that that can be pushed. There is typically, there can be a cost share at the community level, and that's where potentially some private money could come in. And I think that there's also just, I wanted to mention that, you know, we all throw around these terms of resilience and mitigation and defensible spaces and all those things. And I think there isn't a shared vocabulary and vernacular amongst everyone, and really simplifying that into language that small things matter in a wildland urban interface, right? No wood fences up against your house. And even though it's can be less expensive, but in the long run, it's not less expensive. And so I think some education and helping people understand what those terms even mean, get rid of mulch, put down rocks. We had a huge fire 6 months after the other one, and the only house that survived was the one without wood touching it on the fencing and had 5 foot of metal and rock against the house. So it works. And I think that there's, you know, some of those things that can be done on the urban level as well.
Chair. We got one final question.
So I lived through Wildfire in Malibu and then tried to rebuild it on a contractor. And that's where I said, it was impossible to contract the thing. Now we're 10 times as bad.
Right.
So I started a prefab company because there's just no way, and then heard prefab construction, there's just no way, there's not enough contractors, especially with immigration raids. I've lost a third of my employees who are afraid to come to work. So we need, one of the innovations that has been discussed, prefab, and I just want to know what people are thinking about.
Yeah, Bill, you want to comment on the prefab or 3D printing stuff? Anybody?
Yeah, I can comment a little bit on that. And sorry, it was just, I think with the audio, I couldn't hear quite everything that was said, but yeah, I think there's a lot of really interesting work happening around housing, and wildfire. You know, there's modular ADU type solutions, there's new building materials, there's you know, mass timber, sort of pre-assembled type homes. There's all kinds of really interesting stuff. One of the companies I looked at recently is trying to help. How do you make it easy to design fire safe landscaping? Like we all, you know, it's not quite as simple as being like remove the trees, remove the fence, put in the 5 feet, because it makes your house look like a bomb shelter. And so, you know, how do you sort of do that in a way that's appealing to the homeowner? So I think there's a lot of potential innovation in that area, and we haven't seen really that much of it yet. Maybe one other point I would just make is that I think this issue in wildfire is really connected to broader housing policy, though, too. It's like, why are there so many homes being built in the wildland urban interface? It's like, well, we're not letting you build it anywhere else. So that's kind of where it flows to. And so, you know, I think also thinking about the housing aspect of this, not just as like just a WUI issue, but it's sort of how do we build more density in our sort of urban cores, so that less people are sort of, you know, that people are choosing to live in the WUI, or those that actually are choosing to live there, you know, and aren't being forced there because they can't build elsewhere, can't find housing elsewhere. So housing is just like you know, it's such an important part of this. And yeah, I think we're just scratching the surface of how technology can play a role in that.
Absolutely. I just want to thank again the panelists for, you guys are busy people, and thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Jan. We do have some materials and stuff, and obviously some incredible resources in the room to share everybody's information. Obviously in a respectful way, non-solicitation. Nothing is just to be clear, this is a collaborative environment. It's a conversation, and most importantly, the next one we have is on July 15th. If you guys want to come to that, not on LA fires, it's on mental health and wellness. We have a lot of clients working in that vertical. We'd love to have you again. Thank you to Bill, Aaron, Seth, and also Jerry. Some amazing comments from you guys, and a tremendous issue that we're all facing here in the city of Los Angeles. So thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.